want to talk about the fashion industry when it comes to the US versus London. And we've had a little bit of conversation about this, about either being a student in the US or, working in the fashion industry here. And it just feels like I got to get overseas. I got to go to the schools over there. I got to have an internship over there. I've got to have the job, in London, Paris, Milan, wherever. Um, Tell me a little bit about your perception from that. Are we overplaying this? And do you feel like the fashion industry in London is as enamored with the US, or are we as US just making a little too big of a deal of this?
I mean, I think in a humbling way, the US is incredibly loving and warm towards towards the UK, not just because of our accent, but because of, the prestige, well, and also, the royal family most of the time, of which I know we're
Hmm.
going to touch on that a bit later, but um, there's such prestige around a number of the institutions or learning institutions that we have here, such as Central St. Martin's, London College of Fashion, and so on. And that's great. But one of my, and actually what I'll also say is that every market, when we look at London or Paris or Milan or New York or the States in that sense, there's a different kind of tone of voice when it comes to the fashion that's typically being represented in each market. Italy for me is always a bit more glam and a bit more sexy. London is a lot more edgy and raw. Paris is chic and it's refined. And when I think of America, it typically has the tag of preppy attached to it, but I think we've moved beyond that
Mm.
over the years. But it's interesting because right now we're at a point where we're seeing a lot more of the smaller brands bubbling up in both those markets, the US and the UK, but small independent Black owned businesses, which is quite interesting when we look at the likes of Paya Moss and Telfar. But then we've got over here Bianca Saunders and Sol Nash, who have just been nominated for the LVMH prize. And it's great again that we have these institutions, but it just kind of purports this ingrained system of elitism. And in many
Mm.
ways, I want to kind of try and remove that because not everybody can afford to pay the fees to go to those institutes. And we're limiting people's success or their potential success by not giving them the opportunity to go to these institutes. But actually, there are so many other great places that don't get talked about as much, that aren't the prestigious schools that people are going to and doing great things at, but they're not exactly being celebrated. So I get the love affair with wanting to come to London and be here and study and be engrossed in the culture here because London is awesome. But also we speak so highly of London, and actually the UK has so many other great destinations within it. Birmingham, Manchester, there's creative talent present everywhere across the UK, but we so often reach for London as being the epicenter of cool. And
Mm.
we kind of need to reduce that level of, or that notion of London being the be and end all of cool. Because what does that do for the people that live in other places? We make them feel as if
Right.
they have to come to London to exist, and actually they should be able to exist wherever they are. Um, honing their craft wherever they are. I feel like I've answered that in a really long-winded way, but hopefully that
No,
gives
that
some
makes
insight as to
sense.
my thought.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you touched on a really important point that we're going to have to look at with the fashion industry overall, which is elitism. And that lends itself to inclusion. And we can talk about that with diversity, we can talk about that with sustainability. Like, I think it crosses across many subjects. So I think that's a good point there that you bring up.